Joshua and Caleb. And as Joshua is going in that day, if you go back and reread him, like he was bold. Like he's the type, I named my oldest son after Joshua. Like he's the type of man that I want to raise my boys to be. He was bold. He was saying, no, we can trust God. We can go in and conquer those people. God has already given this over to us. No matter what comes our way, we can trust him. That's the type of man that Joshua was. But as you continue to read past this story here, and eventually you read through Numbers and you get through Deuteronomy and you get all the way to Joshua chapter 1, Joshua chapter 1 starts with the passage, with the phrase, then Moses has died. And that's a big deal for them because Moses was everything to them. Moses was as close to Christ as you could imagine a human being to be. He was their king, essentially. He was a prophet, he was everything to them. And now he had died, and all eyes turn over to Joshua. And at this moment now, after 40 years, they're about ready to walk into the promised land. And in that moment, something interesting happens. Because here's Joshua, and he is bold, he is brash. He says, I'm going to believe God in every single thing. But whenever we get over to Joshua chapter 1, what we find out is Joshua now doesn't seem to have that same courage. So because in Joshua chapter 1, if you remember it, it actually starts out with the Lord coming up to Joshua and saying, hey, Joshua, be strong and courageous today. And as a father, I know that whenever I tell my sons to be brave, it's usually because they're not being brave. The other day, we took my middle child over to the doctor. I could see him just being a little bit scared. And so I leaned down and was like, Michael, can you be brave for me? Can you be brave? And he starts to kind of stand up tall. He gets a smile on his face. And then we walk actually into the office, and then he shrinks back down. And so then I had to go back to him again and I say, hey, Micah, can you be brave for me? Can you be brave? And I kept having to tell him to be brave for me because I could see that he wasn't very brave. And whenever we get to Joshua chapter 1, we see this bold man of God coming up, and the Lord has to come to him and says, Joshua, please be strong and courageous today. And then what happens next is a few verses down, it says, hey, Joshua, haven't I already commanded you to be strong and courageous? You don't have to tell somebody twice to be strong and courageous, and if they're actually already strong and courageous, do you? You only have to tell somebody to be strong and courageous when they're scared. Because and then in the next verse, he says, Joshua, don't forget, be strong and courageous. 3 times. 3 times in the very first chapter here, he says, be strong and courageous. And we look at that and we say, what happened between Numbers 14, whenever this young man of God was so bold that was saying, I'm going to trust God, he's going to give us what he's promised to. And now as an old man, 3 different times the Lord has to come to him and remind him, be strong and courageous, Joshua. My theory is 40 years in the wilderness will do that to you. Some of us have been walking around in the wilderness for a really long time. And that courage, that boldness that we used to have that said, I will trust God, I'm not going to stray, I'm going to walk into the promises that he has called me to walk in. For some of us, after so long of just feeling like we've been in the wilderness for so long, we feel like I don't have that courage anymore. So if it's me today that needs to exhort you, let me remind you, be strong and courageous for the Lord today.